What's going on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music. Today I want to talk about these two records right here. We got one from Vacationer, his album Wavelengths, which was released on Paxico Records in 2019, as well as Michels Affair's Adult Themes, released on Big Crown in 2020. Been listening to both these records quite a bit as of late, and as such, I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions of them, and let you know why I think these two records are worth checking out. So with that being said, let's talk about these two. Starting with the new record first, we got the Michels Affair Adult Themes, released on Big Crown in 2020. This was probably one of the first anticipated records of 2020. Not only am I a huge fan of Michels Affair's Wu-Tang covers albums, Enter the 37th Chamber and Return to the 37th Chamber, but I am a ginormous fan of their 2005 album, Sounding Out the City, which is one of my all-time favorite modern funk records, and it's one of the records that is actually largely responsible for getting me into funk music in the first place. Eventually, I will have to do a video discussing how much I love this record and how much I think people should check it out. But for now, let's talk about the new record. Part of the reason that I was originally excited for this record was it represents the first set of original music from Michels Affair since the release of 2005's Sounding Out the City. So I was really curious to hear what they had in store on this record. And despite the fact that it is completely divorced from any other project, it definitely still feels like it has a lot of Wu-Tang residue left over in this record. And as such, it's quite a brooding, dark, menacing, cinematic record that's also extremely funky, expertly composed, and just overall a joy to listen to. Much like a lot of other Michels Affair projects, each track is loaded with tons of instrumentation, be it a broken old piano, some spooky sounding synths, an eclectic mix of horns and woodwinds, some of the driest drums you will hear on any record this year, some really nasty guitar and bass, both electric and acoustic, and some really nice, breathy, soothing vocals to finish it all off. And some of the highlight tracks from this record are actually some of my favorite tracks from this year. From the lazy drift of the opening track, Infant, the haunting but extra funky Rubik's, and the absolutely larger-than-life gargantuan horns on the track Hips are all some of the highlights from this record. This is another solid release from Michels Affair. Not that I was expecting anything less. The arrangements on here are creative, clever, and engaging. It's nice to hear that they're not just sticking to straight up trying to copy the funk and soul greats and really trying to carve out a sound for themselves, and it really seemed like the intent going into this record was to make an invisible soundtrack to a movie that doesn't exist, and I think they really did a bang-up job. Although the cover would lead you to believe that this is a much more sensual record, it really doesn't have that atmosphere to it. Kind of feels more like a suspense murder mystery, or even in some places like a flat-out horror movie. But in general, I really dig this record. The arrangements are great. There's a lot of great moments on here. It's engaging throughout. It's super funky. The only minorest of complaints that I have is I feel like it is way too bogged down with transitional tracks like the Adult Theme numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 that are all right but seem more to serve as transitional moments in the record rather than actual songs, which is kind of disappointing considering that this record comes in at a rather paltry 30-something minutes. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I guess the only complaint that I really have is that I just want more music from this record. But that being said, it really didn't take away from my overall enjoyment of this record. Highly recommend that you pick it up. It's still one of my favorite records of the year, and if you're looking for something different from the whole modern funk and soul metal scene, you really can't go wrong with this record. So Adult Themes, L. Michels Affair, definitely comes highly recommended from me. Next up we have Vacationer Wavelengths, released on Pexco Records in 2019. This is a record that I went completely blind into. I was looking around on Jet Set for more instrumental hip-hop, and I wanted to pick up some other releases from Pexco Records, which is becoming one of my favorite labels as of late. Stumbled across this one, it was on sale, so after listening to a couple of sample tracks, I was pretty intrigued by it, so I thought I would give it a listen. And I gotta be honest, I'm really glad that I picked this up. I did not expect anything more than just a solid set of instrumental hip-hop, and what I got is actually one of the more interesting and refreshing takes on a genre that is dangerously close to becoming stale for me. Similarly to a lot of Madlib's productions post Jay Dilla's Donuts, a lot of the tracks on here feel like they're made up of cut-up loops that vary in length depending on the track, but where I think this record really separates itself is in the sample sources that he uses on this record. Rather than being 100% made up of your average funk and soul and jazz samples, this record seems to actually have a bit of a almost a dream pop and electronic music inspiration behind it. But whatever the case may be, this is definitely some very unique sounding instrumental hip-hop to me, and it definitely comes off as being a lot richer, a lot brighter, a lot more colorful, and in general a lot more uplifting than a lot of the other instrumental hip-hop that's out there. And while that may not make it sound like it's an appealing instrumental hip-hop record, the drums on here absolutely snap with some of the hardest hitting kicks that I've heard on a instrumental hip-hop record in a long time. There's definitely tons of neck snapping moments on this record. From front to back, the majority of the records are pretty uplifting, but also still have just enough neck snap to them to make it a unmistakable instrumental hip-hop record. Adding on top of that, it just has a certain richness and a certain dreamy atmosphere to it as well that makes it a intricate and layered listen that I want to go back to over and over again. Honestly, this has been one of the biggest surprises of the year, and I'm really happy that I ended up picking it up, as I was, honest to God, just expecting a solid, if not just run-of-the-mill set of instrumentals, and what I got is actually one of the most refreshing instrumental hip-hop projects that I've heard in a long time. So if you haven't checked this guy out, Vacationer's Wavelengths, this is definitely an instrumental hip-hop project that I recommend that everybody give a listen. It definitely wasn't what I was expecting, but it was definitely a very, very pleasant surprise. So this record also comes highly recommended from me. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you've listened to any of these records for yourself, let me know what you thought of them down in the comments. If you want to hear any of these records for yourself, please head over to my WordPress blog, because that's where I post music links to any of the records that I talk about on this channel. Make sure you head over to my Mixcloud, where you can check out Raw Select Radio. Also, make sure you head over to my SoundCloud, because I uploaded a 2-hour retrospective of all the DJ Food records that I have in my collection. And as always, make sure you're here on Sundays at 8 p.m. Japan Standard Time for Live from the Record Room. There you can hear me play the records that I talk about in these videos, as well as some of the other records that I have in my collection that I don't get a chance to talk about on this channel. Links to everything, as always, down in the description. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. So until then, peace out!